I can't even tell y'all how many people have sent me this article this week. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So, to get a gist of what happened, 215 bodies were found in what they call a pauper field or cemetery behind a jail in Jackson, Mississippi. To give you some background, a 37-year-old man named Dexter Wade was reported missing last March 2023 by his mother. And he was finally discovered buried in the cemetery in August of 2023. It was found out that he was hit by a police car and buried in that field after they could not identify him or find any identifying information. Along with Dexter, there are 214 other bodies, some of which were in the jail and some of which arrived there from unknown circumstances. So they're going to have people working on identifying these likely men and finding their closest living relatives. On top of that, the people who have discovered their loved ones are there are having to pay in order to get their bodies exhumed and returned to them so that they can have a proper burial. Now, how is this legal? It's a little gray. If I had to guess, the law enforcement agency and jail are going to use a lack of up-to-date information and contact information as their excuse for not notifying the families that their loved ones did die or were unalived in different ways. But that's really not a very good excuse. They could easily look this up or get an agency like mine to find out information. I track down people's whereabouts all the time, legally, to the best of my ability, but there's people that have much more powerful tools than my nonprofit does to locate people. The bigger issue I want to discuss is what happens with missing men, especially men of color and men that have a potentially criminal history. So say it with me. People don't care about missing men. And I'm saying this as professionally as possible, but the statistics speak for themselves. Not only am I a missing person advocate and expert and resource, but I'm also a scientist. So let's go ahead and look at some statistics from the 2022 missing person file record from the National Crime Information Center, also called the NCIC. I have to use the 2022 record because the 2023 report is not out. So in 2022, missing person reports for males was about 50% of all cases. Keep in mind, a vast majority of cases, about 64%, are missing juveniles, and about 95% of those cases are considered runaways. I've already talked about how I feel about the term runaway. We can always talk about it some other time. Right now, we're talking about missing adult males. And before I give you the data, let me ask you this. When is the last time you remember seeing a high-profile case of a missing adult male? Can you think of one? Most of the long-term missing person cases I've been working on and are continuing to take on now. In fact, most of the ones I've gotten within the last year have been missing men, but not all of them. There are missing adult women and non-binary people as well. But more long-term cases that I've worked on have been men. And why is that? A lot of people have a bias. I have a bias as well, unfortunately. These are intrinsic things we have to work on reducing. But when we see a man who's gone missing, we assume that that man can take care of himself. And if the man has come across something that has taken their life, we assume that they will be located. But obviously, that's not always the case. So when we look at the statistics from 2022, there was about 275,000 missing person reports involving men. And then we can break it down by ethnic group. They use 5 categories at the NCIC. This is where I have to get my notes because I can't remember numbers. Ask my students. So of those it's not quite 275,000. Of those 275,000 cases, 0.01% were Asian, 17% were Black, 0.008% are Indigenous. We can talk about why Indigenous reports are so low at another time. Unknown is about 0.018%. I'm assuming this means that the DNA markers that you can use, although they're not very reliable, weren't giving them feedback, and maybe the person was so decomposed or degraded it was impossible to tell. Maybe they were also mixed race. And then white men made up about 29% of those cases. So the two largest populations of missing person reports are white men and black men. And yet, when is the last time that you saw a high profile case involving a man? And when is the last time you saw a high profile case involving a man of color? I quite literally cannot think of one. And I live in a city that is predominantly black. And then imagine that we're dealing with men who have potentially committed crimes or have a criminal record or were involved with law enforcement in some way, and people kind of ignore them. I'm not blaming anyone, because at the end of the day, I believe that this is a media or a PR issue where the media reports on cases that they believe are going to get more interactions, clicks, and likes, because that's what their advertisements rely on for income. And yet we have people in our families and communities that are missing that need the support. So at the end of the day, the real question is, how can we engage more with these cases so that media starts to promote them more within their own circuits? I'm not going to go down the path of talking about missing white woman syndrome right now. My nonprofit has done research on it with the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. It does exist. If you haven't heard about it, look it up. Maybe I'll do another story about this soon. But there's a real problem in our country with the way that we treat missing men, and especially men of color. Although men are more capable, stronger, and considered more able to take care of themselves, that does not mean that they cannot end up in harm's way. When someone is reported missing, it means that someone is concerned about their well-being, and it's our duty as a community to do as much as we can to support that person and help them find their missing loved one, regardless of what the outcome of that missingness is. Having a criminal record does not mean you're not a human. Being a man does not mean that you're not vulnerable. And we have to figure out a way to start helping all people. I'm so sad from hearing this story. I'm so grateful for everyone that has sent this to me. I wish I had a better answer for what we could do, but the answer at the end of the day is to engage with these cases. Ask the media and the community to engage with these cases and reports, and put pressure on law enforcement so that they look for them and give us answers about where these people are.